Stop, listen, pay attention. Chosen one. This moment is not background noise, and it is not accidental. You have been carrying something that did not announce itself loudly. It showed up as weight, as pressure that pressed evenly from all sides, leaving no obvious point to push against. You kept moving anyway. You went to work. You answered messages. You handled responsibilities. And yet beneath the routine there was a quiet strain that never fully let go. This message arrives because that strain reached a threshold. You may have noticed fatigue that sleep did not fully resolve, a sense of isolation even while surrounded by people, a subtle confusion that did not come from ignorance but from overload. Decisions that once felt simple began to feel dense, not dramatic, just heavy, and you did not collapse under it. You adjusted, you regulated, you stayed functional. That matters. This is not an alarm meant to frighten you. There is no warning being issued. There is recognition. What you experienced was real, measurable, and specific to you. It was not a mood. It was not weakness, and it was not random timing. You have likely questioned yourself in quiet moments. You may have wondered why things felt harder without a visible reason. You may have assumed you were simply tired or that life was asking too much at once. Those explanations were close but incomplete. They described the surface without naming the cause. Clarity is coming, but not all at once. This message is not designed to overwhelm you with answers. It is designed to orient you, to place a steady hand on your awareness and say, "This happened, you endured it, and there is a reason your system did not break under the load." You are not here to relive the pressure. You are here to understand it. What you faced did not announce itself with chaos. It applied itself quietly. It tested consistency, patience, and internal stability. You were not asked to fight. You were asked to remain coherent, and you did. That is why this message is intentional. It is not general encouragement. It is a direct response to a real sequence you lived through. You are not being singled out for praise. You are being addressed because your experience qualifies you to hear what comes next. Take a breath. Let your attention settle. You do not need to strain to understand this. You only need to stay present. Continue when you are ready. This is where ambiguity ends. This message is not for everyone who happens to be listening. It is not for those who are curious, entertained, or passing time. It is for you because what occurred did not brush past you. It involved you directly. You were not observing pressure. You were inside it, responding to it moment by moment. You did not need to label yourself for this to apply. You did not need belief affirmation or preparation. The identity being named here did not begin with this message. It was revealed by how you functioned when circumstances applied sustained force. You did not rise into strength. You defaulted to it. That distinction matters. Many people struggle consciously. They notice strain immediately. They react, resist, spiral, or externalize what they feel. You did something different. You stayed operational. You absorbed impact without dramatic expression. You adjusted internally rather than collapsing outwardly. Even when you felt tired or uncertain, your core behavior remained intact. This is not about effort. It is about structure. You may not have felt strong. You may not have felt certain. And yet your actions showed continuity. Your values did not dissolve. Your responsibilities were not abandoned. Your internal compass stayed aligned even when clarity felt reduced. That is not a coincidence. That is an indicator. This is why this message is for you. The term chosen one here is not a title to inflate you. It is a descriptor for someone whose system holds under load without requiring constant reinforcement. You did not need reassurance to keep moving. You did not need applause to stay regulated. You did not need answers to remain steady. You endured without theatrics. Others under similar conditions seek escape, distraction, or validation. You did not. Even if you questioned privately, you did not unravel publicly. Even if you felt pressure internally, you did not project it outward. That is not suppression. That is containment. And containment is not common. This message locks onto you because your response pattern revealed something stable beneath the surface. Not learned recently, not activated temporarily, built in, automatic, quiet, reliable. You were not bracing yourself consciously every moment. You were functioning from a baseline that does not depend on favorable conditions. That is what separates conscious struggle from unconscious stability. One requires constant effort. The other holds shape even when effort is depleted. You are being addressed because what you endured did not define you. It confirmed you. Stay with this. There is more to understand, and it will connect cleanly to what you already recognize in yourself. There is one experience you recognize immediately, even if you never named it clearly. It was not pain in the usual sense. It was pressure that did not have an obvious source. A persistent sense of compression, as if your internal space had narrowed. Your thoughts still worked, but they moved through resistance. Your emotions were present, but muted or dense. You did not feel out of control. You felt constrained. That sensation led you to question yourself. You may have wondered if something was wrong with your motivation, if you were losing energy, if you were becoming disconnected. You may have tried to rest more, think less, distract yourself, or push through. None of those fully addressed it because the sensation was not a malfunction. It was a signal. Signals are often misunderstood because they do not explain themselves. You were not experiencing weakness, you were experiencing load. And load does not announce itself as clarity, it announces itself as drag. The mind interprets drag as a problem, the body interprets it as fatigue. The emotions interpret it as dullness or distance. But those interpretations are secondary. The primary event was pressure being applied to a system that was already operating near capacity. You judged yourself because you assumed the sensation meant you were failing to cope. In reality, it meant you were coping continuously. A system that is failing collapses. A system under pressure tightens and conserves. You did the latter. You reduced unnecessary output. You became quieter, more selective, less reactive. That was not withdrawal. That was regulation. Pressure reveals design. When a structure encounters sustained force, it either fractures or redistributes load internally. You redistributed. You did not dramatize what you felt. You did not externalize blame. You did not abandon function. You adapted in ways that were subtle enough to go unnoticed, even by you. This is why the symptom confused you. You expected breakdown or release. Instead, you experienced containment. You expected clarity or collapse. Instead, you felt compressed continuity. That can feel unsettling because it lacks a narrative. There is no story attached to it, just sensation. That sensation was information. It was your system signaling that it was holding more than usual and doing so intentionally, not as a reaction, but as a response. You were not being overwhelmed. You were being tested for coherence under sustained invisible weight. There is no fault in how you interpreted it at first. Most people are taught to see discomfort as dysfunction. But some discomfort is diagnostic. It reveals capacity. What you felt was not something to fix. It was something to recognize. And once recognized, it leads naturally to a deeper understanding of what was applying that pressure in the first place. What you experienced did not come from nowhere. The pressure you felt was not abstract, and it was not self-generated. It was applied. Quietly, evenly, without spectacle. And it followed a pattern that was recent, coordinated, and intentional in its timing. Not to overwhelm you, but to see how you would function when multiple vectors converged at once. This is important to say clearly. There was no dramatic confrontation, no sudden event that announced itself as the cause. Instead, several subtle demands arrived in close proximity. Expectations increased. Recovery time shortened. Mental bandwidth narrowed. Emotional processing slowed. None of these were extreme on their own. Together, they created a sustained field of pressure. And you remained operational. That is the defining feature of what occurred. Not that pressure existed, but that you continued to function without losing internal alignment. You did not become erratic. You did not become impulsive. You did not shut down. You adjusted your pace, your output, and your focus, but your core remained stable. This is where many people misunderstand endurance. Endurance is not about pushing harder. It is about maintaining coherence while force is applied. You did not accelerate. You stabilized. You reduced noise. You became more precise. You conserved energy where it mattered. That is not avoidance. That is skill. The pressure was invisible because it did not arrive as a crisis. It arrived as accumulation, a little less margin here, a little more demand there, a narrowing of options without a clear explanation. This kind of pressure is designed to reveal structural integrity, not emotional reaction. And the timing matters. This occurred recently, not in the distant past. It coincided with a period when your internal development had reached a certain maturity. Had it arrived earlier, it might have destabilized you. Had it arrived later, it would have been redundant. It arrived when it could measure something specific. Your ability to stay regulated under sustained low-visibility strain. You did not need to know this was happening to pass through it. Awareness was not required. Performance was. And your system responded appropriately. You stayed present. You stayed functional. You stayed internally ordered, even when external conditions felt compressed. This was not an attack. It was not punishment. It was a confrontation in the most neutral sense of the word. A meeting between pressure and structure. And the outcome was clear. You held. To understand what you moved through, it helps to slow it down and look at the pressure in pieces rather than as one blurred experience. What made this period difficult was not intensity. It was layering. Several forms of strain operated at the same time, each subtle enough to be dismissed on its own, but together forming a sustained load. The first pressure point was doubt not about who you are, but about timing and clarity. You did not question your values or your direction. You questioned pace. You noticed delays where you expected movement, pauses where you expected confirmation. This kind of doubt does not feel loud. It feels like hesitation without fear. You stayed engaged anyway. You did not freeze. You continued to act responsibly even without reassurance. That shows internal trust, not certainty, but trust in your own coherence. The second pressure point was fear, but not the dramatic kind. It was background concern, a quiet awareness of consequence. You became more aware of what was at stake, more aware of how much depended on your stability. That awareness could have tipped into anxiety. It did not. You acknowledged risk without being consumed by it. You did not catastrophize. You adjusted your behavior slightly, became more careful, more measured. Fear did not drive you. It informed you, and then it receded. The third pressure point was energy drain. Your reserves were being used faster than they were replenished. Rest helped, but not completely. Motivation fluctuated. Tasks required more intention. This is where many people lose consistency. You did not. You lowered output where possible without abandoning responsibility. You chose efficiency over intensity. You did not shame yourself for needing recovery. You regulated your energy instead of fighting depletion. That preserved your core. The fourth pressure point was isolation. Not social isolation necessarily, but internal isolation. You could not fully explain what you were experiencing to others, and you sensed that doing so would not bring clarity anyway. This often leads to emotional withdrawal or resentment. You did neither. You accepted the solitude without dramatizing it. You did not demand to be understood. You stayed connected where it mattered and quiet where it did not. That restraint protected your stability. The fifth pressure point was delay. Progress slowed. Feedback loops lengthened. Results took longer to appear. This kind of delay tests patience and identity at the same time. You did not rush to force outcomes. You did not abandon the process. You stayed present in the waiting without turning waiting into a story about failure. You continued to show up. That is regulation at a deep level. Across all of these categories, the pattern is the same. You did not eliminate pressure. You absorbed it. You did not dramatize strain. You distributed it internally. You did not react impulsively. You responded deliberately. This is not about being unfeeling. You felt everything. You simply did not let any single pressure point override your internal order. That is what held you steady, not resistance. Regulation. Now that the pressure has eased enough for reflection, you can review what happened with more precision. This was not a lucky stretch where things happened to work out. It was not coincidence that you remained intact. When you look back, you can see a consistent pattern of internal coherence. Even when conditions shifted, your core responses stayed aligned. Your behavior made sense across time. Your decisions were not erratic. Your values did not oscillate. That consistency is the confirmation. If chance were responsible, there would be inconsistency. Moments of collapse followed by recovery, overcorrection, reactive choices that contradict each other. That did not occur. Instead, there was a steady line of regulated response, even when you felt reduced clarity or increased fatigue. This is where explanations based on luck or circumstance fall apart. Luck does not produce sustained regulation. Favorable conditions do not teach restraint. Coincidence does not preserve internal order under layered strain. What carried you through was not external alignment. It was internal resilience paired with coherence. You did not solve the situation by thinking your way out of it. You lived through it without fragmenting. That distinction matters. Many people intellectualize pressure and miss the fact that the body and nervous system are doing most of the work. Yours stayed organized. You may realize now that you trusted yourself more than you thought. Not in an emotional way, but in a functional one. You allowed uncertainty without forcing premature answers. You allowed fatigue without abandoning responsibility. You allowed silence without filling it with noise. Those are not passive choices. They are disciplined ones. This review also removes a subtle self-accusation you may have carried. You may have believed that if you were stronger, you would not have felt strain at all. That belief is inaccurate. Strength does not eliminate pressure. It determines how pressure is handled. You handled it without destabilizing your life, your relationships, or your internal compass. That is the confirmation. When the system is sound, pressure reveals it rather than breaking it. What you experienced validated something that was already present. Not potential, but structure. Not aspiration, but capacity. You do not need to reinterpret the past with drama. You only need to acknowledge what your response already showed. You endured without distortion. You stayed coherent without external reinforcement. That is what makes the next understanding credible. You are not guessing about who you are. You have evidence. It is useful now to place your experience beside common human responses, not to elevate you, but to clarify what is rare about what occurred. Most people do not need extreme pressure to destabilize. Smaller disruptions are often enough. A single unresolved stressor, a period of uncertainty or a sense of delay, can lead to visible breakdown. Sleep is affected. Emotions become reactive. Behavior becomes inconsistent. Attention fragments. This is not a moral failing. It is a typical response when internal structure is still forming. You were not spared pressure. You carried more than many do. And yet you remained present. While others under less strain often seek escape, you did not disappear. While others externalize discomfort through blame or withdrawal, you stayed engaged. While others require constant reassurance to maintain direction, you continued without it. That difference is not superiority, it is maturity of regulation. Rarity does not mean exceptional talent. It means uncommon stability. You did not become sharper under pressure. You became quieter. You did not need to prove anything. You did not rush to demonstrate strength. You simply continued to function. That is what is uncommon. The absence of collapse, where collapse would be expected. This comparison is not about labeling others as weak. It is about acknowledging variance in internal readiness. Many people are still building the structures that allow them to hold sustained ambiguity. You already had them. That is not a judgment. It is a description. You may have noticed this difference before, even earlier in life. Moments where situations that unsettled others felt manageable to you. Not easy, but navigable. Moments where you were the one others leaned on, even if you did not volunteer for that role. Those moments were early indicators of the same pattern. Again, this is not about ego. You did not outperform others. You did not exceed expectations loudly. You simply stayed intact. That is rare because it requires alignment across mind, body, and behavior. It requires the ability to tolerate not knowing without unraveling. This is why the experience you just lived through matters. It did not grant you something new. It revealed a level of stability that many people do not encounter until much later, if at all. You were not elevated by pressure. You were clarified by it. And that clarity leads naturally into a more precise understanding of your identity without exaggeration or mysticism. Part 8, Identity Clarification. What becomes clear now is that your strength did not switch on during this period. It was already there. You did not enter a heightened state. You did not access a hidden reserve. You operated from your baseline. That is the most important clarification. When pressure arrived, you did not transform. You remained yourself. And that self was sufficient. Many people misunderstand resilience because they associate it with activation. They believe strength appears only in response to challenge. In your case, challenge revealed that your system is already organized for load. You did not rise to the occasion. You met it without adjustment. This points to preparation rather than reaction. Your stability comes from internal coherence that has been built over time, through lived experience, through responsibility, through learning when to engage and when to conserve, through tolerating ambiguity without demanding immediate resolution. These are not traits that activate suddenly. They accumulate quietly. You did not need to be told what to do when pressure increased. You did not need instruction or reinforcement. Your responses emerged naturally. That is the mark of maturity. Not excitement, not intensity, reliability. This is why it is important to avoid supernatural explanations here. Nothing extraordinary intervened. There was no external force carrying you. What carried you was structure. Your nervous system stayed regulated. Your attention stayed ordered. Your sense of self did not fragment. Those are internal conditions, not events. The term chosen one in this context does not imply destiny or exception. It describes someone whose internal framework has been shaped enough to hold responsibility without distortion. Someone whose baseline includes patience, restraint, and continuity. Someone who does not require constant certainty to remain aligned. You did not become this recently. This identity has likely been present in quieter forms for a long time. It may have expressed itself as early responsibility, emotional containment, or the tendency to think before reacting. You may have felt older than your age at times, or more composed than situations required. Those were not coincidences. They were early expressions of the same structure. This clarification is not meant to change how you see yourself dramatically. It is meant to stabilize your understanding. You are not fragile. You are not barely holding together. You are not dependent on favorable conditions to function. You are already built to carry weight. Recognizing this does not inflate you. It grounds you. And from that grounded position, the final integration becomes practical rather than abstract. What matters now is not analysis, but integration. Understanding what you endured is useful only if it helps you live more clearly going forward. This is not a moment to become hyper-alert or self-monitoring. It is a moment to recalibrate gently, using what you now know about your own structure. First, allow rest without justification. You do not need to earn recovery. Rest is not retreat. It is maintenance. Your system held sustained load, and recovery restores elasticity. Take rest seriously, but calmly. No guilt, no urgency. Second, practice discernment rather than overexposure. You do not need to process everything or everyone. Your strength does not come from availability. It comes from selectivity. Notice what drains without informing you, and what informs without draining. Choose accordingly. Third, reinforce boundaries quietly, not defensively, not dramatically, simply by deciding where your attention goes and where it does not. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They allow function without overload. Fourth, honor patience as an active state. Delay does not mean stagnation. You have already proven that you can remain aligned without immediate outcome. Let timing unfold without forcing acceleration. Pressure does not require urgency. It requires steadiness. Fifth, maintain focus on essentials. When pressure increases, complexity becomes tempting. You may feel drawn to overthinking, overplanning, or overcorrecting. Resist that. Simplicity preserves coherence. Do fewer things with more presence. Sixth, return to ordinary life without reinterpretation. There is no need to narrate what you experience to yourself repeatedly. You do not need to memorialize it. Integration happens through normal action, not constant reflection. This is balance. You are not meant to watch for the next test. You are meant to live from the stability that has already been confirmed. Awareness should make life lighter, not heavier. More spacious, not more controlled. As you move forward, you may notice a subtle shift. Less self-doubt. Less need to explain yourself internally. More trust in your own pacing. These are signs of integration, not change. You are not becoming someone new. You are settling more fully into who you already are. When you are ready, we will close this transmission cleanly. You can release any remaining tension now. Nothing is being asked of you beyond recognition. You are not behind. You are not late. And you are not recovering from failure. What you lived through confirmed a capacity that was already present. That is the core realization. Simple, grounded, sufficient. You withstood pressure without losing yourself. You remained coherent without constant certainty. You stayed present when withdrawal would have been easier. Let those statements settle without embellishment. There is no need to hold this understanding tightly. It does not disappear when unattended. It becomes part of how you move, decide, and rest. Quiet confidence does not announce itself. It shows up as ease. If it helps hold 1 or 2 affirmations as anchors, not mantras, you can say to yourself calmly, I am steady under load. My baseline is stable. I trust my internal order. Nothing more is required. If this message matched your experience, mark the moment. You can do that simply. In the comments, write 777 or write, I remember. Not for visibility, for acknowledgement. Naming recognition helps integrate it. If you want to continue this kind of grounded clarity, stay connected. Subscribe if you choose. The next messages will build on this understanding without urgency or pressure. For now, return to your day. Carry less explanation. Move with patience. Rest when needed. This phase is complete. You are steady.